again. It's just me, and as always, I've come to visit you, and I have brought my favorite book that I'm currently obsessed with, The Complete Grimm's Fairy Tales. I've just really been enjoying going through the book and picking out certain stories that I think that you will enjoy. I'm also fascinated with how much these fairy tales get changed. They get changed because they're too dark, or they have some violence in them that might not be suitable for children. And they get changed when Disney or some other entertainment company wants to make a movie, and they don't want to include some of the darker and more disturbing aspects of the story in the movie. So tonight at my house, it's kind of a cloudy, stormy, windy night. And I'm tucked in here, and I'm sitting on my couch near my wood stove. And I think I'm going to read you a story that you probably know by another name. You know this story, I'm sure, by its new title, Sleeping Beauty. But the original title in the Grimm's Brothers story is Little Briar Rose. So I don't know if it's dark or stormy where you live, but I hope you're in a nice, warm, safe, comfortable place. And I'm hoping this story will be interesting, but I'm hoping it will also relax you. And maybe like me, you've got a little blanket around you right now. So let's get started with our story. Little Briar Rose. A long time ago, there was a king and a queen who said every day, "Oh, if we only had a child." But they never had one. It happened that once when the queen was bathing, a frog crept out of the water onto the land, and it said to her, "Your wish shall be fulfilled. And before a year had gone by, you shall have a daughter." What the frog had said came true, and the queen had a little girl who was so pretty that the king could not contain himself for joy, and he ordered a great feast. He invited not only his kindred, friends, and acquaintances, but also the wise women, in order that they might be kind and well-disposed towards the child. There were 13 of them in his kingdom, but as he only had 12 golden plates for them to eat out of, one of them had to be left at home. The feast was held with all manner of splendor, and when it came to an end, the wise women bestowed their magic gifts upon the baby. One gave virtue, another beauty, a third riches, and so on, with everything in the world that one can wish for. When 11 of them had made their promises, suddenly the 13th came in. She wished to avenge herself for not having been invited, and without greeting or even looking at anyone, she cried with a loud voice, "The king's daughter shall, in her 15th year, prick herself with a spindle and fall down dead." And without saying a word more, she turned round and left the room. They were all shocked, but the 12th wise woman, whose good wish still remained unspoken, came forward, and as she could not undo the evil sentence, but only soften it, she said, "It shall not be death, but a deep sleep of 100 years into which the princess shall fall. The king, who would fain keep his dear child from the misfortune, gave orders that every spindle in the whole kingdom should be burnt. Meanwhile, the gifts of the wise women were plenteously fulfilled on the young girl, for she was so beautiful, modest, good-natured, and wise that everyone who saw her was bound to love her. It happened that on the very day when she was 15 years old, the king and queen were not at home, and the maiden was left in the palace quite alone. So she went round into all sorts of places, looked into rooms and bedchambers just as she liked, and at last she came to an old tower. She climbed up the narrow winding staircase and reached a little door. A rusty key was in the lock, and when she turned it, the door sprang open, and there in the room sat an old woman with a spindle, busily spinning her flax. "Good day, old mother," said the king's daughter. "What are you doing there?" "I am spinning," said the old woman, and nodded her head. "What sort of thing is that rattles round so merrily?" said the girl, and she took the spindle, and she wanted to spin too. But scarcely had she touched the spindle when the magic decree was fulfilled, and she pricked her finger with it, and in the very moment when she felt the prick, she fell down upon the bed that stood there, and she lay in a deep sleep. And this sleep extended over the whole palace. The king and queen, who had just returned home and had entered the great hall, began to go to sleep, and the whole of the court with them. The horses, too, went to sleep in the stable, the dogs in the yard, the pigeons upon the roof, the flies on the wall. Even the fire that was flaming on the hearth became quiet and slept. The roast meat left off frizzling, and the cook, who was just going to pull the hair of the scullery boy because he had forgotten something, let him go and went to sleep. And the wind fell, and on the trees before the castle not a leaf moved again. But round about the castle there began to grow a hedge of thorns, which every year became higher, and at last grew close up around the castle and all over it, so that there was nothing of it to be seen, not even the flag upon the roof. But the story of the beautiful sleeping Briar Rose, for so the princess was named, went about the country, so that from time to time kings' sons came and tried to get through the thorny hedge into the castle, but they found it impossible, for the thorns held fast together as if they had hands, and the youths were caught in them, could not get loose again, and they died a miserable death. After long, long years, a king's son came again to that country, and he heard an old man talking about the thorn hedge, and that a castle was said to stand behind it, in which a wonderfully beautiful princess named Briar Rose had been asleep for 100 years, and that the king and queen and the whole court were asleep. He had heard too from his grandfather that many kings' sons had already come, and they had tried to get through the thorny hedge, but they had remained sticking fast in it, and they had died a pitiful death. Then the youth said, "I am not afraid. I will go and see the beautiful Briar Rose." The good old man might dissuade him as he would. He did not listen to his words. But by this time the 100 years had just passed, and the day had come when Briar Rose was to wake again. When the king's son came near to the thorn hedge, it was nothing but large and beautiful flowers, which parted from each other of their own accord, and they let him pass unhurt. Then they closed again behind him like a hedge. In the castle yard he saw the horses and the spotted hounds lying asleep. On the roof sat the pigeons, and their heads were under their wings. And when he entered the house, the flies were asleep on the wall. The cook in the kitchen was still holding out his hand to seize the boy, and the maid was sitting by the black hen that she was going to pluck. He went on farther, and in the great hall he saw the whole of the court lying asleep, and by the throne lay the king and the queen. He went on still farther, and all was so quiet that a breath could be heard. And at last he came to the tower, and opened the door into the little room where Briar Rose was sleeping. There she lay, so beautiful that he could not turn his eyes away, and he stooped down, and he gave her a kiss. As soon as he kissed her, Briar Rose opened her eyes and awoke, and she looked at him quite sweetly. Then they went down together, and the king awoke, and the queen, and the whole court, and looked at each other in astonishment. And the horses in the courtyard stood up, and they shook themselves. The hounds jumped up and wagged their tails. The pigeons upon the roof pulled out their heads from under their wings, and they looked round, and they flew into the open country. The flies on the wall crept again. The fire in the kitchen burned up and flickered and cooked the meat. The joint began to turn and sizzle again, and the cook gave the boy such a box on the ear that he screamed. And the maid finished plucking the hen. And then the marriage of the king's son with Briar Rose was celebrated with all splendor, and they lived contented to the very end of their days. And that's the story of Little Briar Rose. It's kind of short and sweet. The other books and movies that have been made from it, of course, added a little more material. But this original version is just very simple and to the point. So I felt kind of relaxed just reading the story to you. And I think I'm about ready to fall asleep. I hope you enjoyed it, and that you're sleepy. I think when I wake up tomorrow morning, I'll look again through my book and find another story to read for next time. And until I come visit you again, I want you to have days filled with happiness and night times that are filled with the sweetest of dreams. And hopefully you're only dreaming about the happier, more pleasant fairy tales. So please take care of yourself, and I look forward to coming back and visiting you again. Good night.